Greetings, 757. I'm Sean Avery, President and CEO of the Hampton Roads Workforce Council, and you're listening to ThinkHire. Thank you for joining us for another episode of ThinkHire, a monthly podcast brought to you by the Hampton Roads Workforce Council, where we bring together experts from the region to talk about economic development, workforce development, and how we're making a difference in the region. And today, I have my friend Doug Smith, President of the Hampton Roads Alliance, who leads our regional economic development organizations. Yep. Doug, how are you today?
Sean, I'm good. Good. It's a beautiful day.
It is. Well, thank you for being here today. Sure. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the Hampton Roads Alliance? I know a lot about it, but you know more.
Right. So we are, as you said, we're the Regional Economic Development Organization for Hampton Roads. What that means is we support 14 of the cities and counties here. We have 80 businesses that actually invest with us as well. And in the simplest terms, we try to grow the traded sector jobs in the region. That means the companies that are selling their goods and services outside the region. So it's lovely to have a retail shop open up, but we want to try and grow the pie. So that's where our focus tends to be. You and I say this all the time. We think of ourselves as the flip side of the coin for the Hampton Roads Workforce Council. I mean, the reality is if we don't do a very good job of creating new jobs, it's not helpful to you. And frankly, if we do create those jobs, bring those jobs, and we don't have employment-ready people to fill those jobs, then that doesn't work either. So thrilled to work with you and your team on just about a daily basis.
Yes, it is. It's almost on a daily basis we have to talk, Doug. And it's okay. We'll keep it up.
What are you going to do?
No, I mean, we do work very closely together. Economic development and workforce development, they just go hand in hand nowadays. And I think we have a good team and we have a good staff behind us that kind of work together on a daily basis as well. So what we're here today, though, is to talk really about a cool project that you actually were the brainchild of, and thought, let's figure out ways we can bring more best practices into this region and really how do we start to meet the needs of our business community more. And so Hampton Roads is home to a number of foreign companies, Germany being one of the major ones where companies have come from. And we all know that Germany has a great workforce system there, a great education system. And so you came up with this idea of, hey, let's take a mission to Germany with a number of people.
Right.
How'd that come about?
Yeah, so we have a group, a consultant in Frankfurt, Germany, that really is effectively our European office. Europe is really a target market for us, and PM and Partners has been saying for a couple of years, really several years now, hey, you need to come over here and really understand how we prepare our workforce. And so you and I started having that conversation. In parallel to that, Taylor Adams, who was then the deputy city manager in Virginia Beach, was frankly having conversations with a couple of his Virginia Beach businesses about coming over there, learning more about workforce. And so it all hit at the right time. And the three of us started chatting about what that might look like. And that resulted in taking 5 mayors, 5 college presidents, some business leaders, economic developers over to Stuttgart, Germany this summer.
And we'll delve deep into the project. But the important thing that is, somebody who may be listening to this podcast and are in the economic development realm, they may say, well, that's not economic development.
Right.
But that is the new model of economic development. That old model of economic development was just trying to get the big whale, get them in here and grow them. But you've got to be thinking differently nowadays. And how does this kind of play into that new model of economic development before we dive into the actual trip?
Yeah, so the old adage forever was location, 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 right? You got the right site, you're going to win 9 times out of 10. And today that mantra, really for the last probably 10 years or more, maybe 15, has been labor, labor, labor. Do you have, and that reality gets more intense every year, as the population demographics shift, and we just don't have the workforce, the size of the workforce that we used to have. It becomes critically important. We don't have a major project that look at the region, contemplate the region, where the first conversation is, how are you going to guarantee me that I'm going to be able to find the employees that I need to carry out my work?
Right. And so workforce is becoming a new area to be focused on. You just can't do it without that. And so that's why you and I work so close together. Flip side of that quarter, I mean, we're the head side, you're the tail side. But
what the heck? You have all the money.
So while we were over there, like you said, we had a great team. We had the colleges, we've had the mayors, we had business leaders, and we chose those individuals for specific reasons because each of them will play a part in how we implement complement those efforts. And
Right.
so one of the real cool things we saw when we were over there was how the business community really jumped in on that project over there. They all really do apprenticeships. They all pay into a system to do apprenticeships.
Right.
Is that important for a project to really be successful, is to have the business community tied into it?
Oh, I think it's everything. So, and candidly, I think Hampton Roads followed an old model for economic development for a long time, really up until the last few years. And just bluntly, we ceded economic development to the public sector. We relied on the public sector to fund it. We relied on the public sector to lead it. We relied on them to, frankly, do all the work. When most regions around the country and, frankly, around the world recognize that you need to have the private sector not just at the table or in the room, but really driving economic development out of their own self-interest, that their company is going to do better if we do economic development better.
Right. And so what we saw in Germany was that their equivalent of the Chamber of Commerce, which
Right.
is probably more our equivalent,
Right.
they actually get funding from the business
Right.
community
Right.
and fund these apprenticeships. And, you know, in our region and in America in general, you know, that's not the model we're used to, but we do
Right.
need to make that mindset, because
Right.
the businesses I remember us talking to said, you know, this is how we're going to grow our talent in the future. We're going to need to invest in our own talent. And so when we're looking at that German model, what were some of the best practices you thought that we saw that we could bring back to America?
Yeah, I think you hit the one, which is have the private sector really at the table, the private employers really at the table. But I think it's worth noting that I don't want people to feel like we're trying to go over and pick up a system and bring it back here, right? Because there's some fundamental differences with how they function, in the role of government and how business works that won't work here, right? So we're going over there trying to figure out what are some pieces that we can take. And as you mentioned, it's literally, in my mind, a tax that these companies pay it's a portion of their revenues that funds that Chamber of Commerce, which really, as you said, is the Hampton Roads Workforce Council. Obviously, we're not going to do that.
Right.
But what we can do is have business at the table, providing internships. And I think you said this, at the end of the day or at the end of the process, there has to be a job, right? There's got to be, and the only way you get that job is for some private company to say, if this person goes through this training, if this person comes through my internship, I will give that person a job.
Right. And it's not unusual. There are some models in Hampton Roads where this is working.
Right.
The shipbuilding, ship repair organizations that are right behind us, many of them have apprenticeship programs where you come into the apprenticeship program and it leads right into a job. And so we were in luck, and we got to visit Steel and we got to visit IMS Gear, and they were doing just that. They were training individuals that were in their 10th, 11th, 12th grade year,
Right.
and they were basically going to automatically come into there and had a job already lined up for them. I mean, how bad is that? That should be how it works. That's how you develop the pipeline.
Right. I want to, you commented on Huntington Ingalls. This is a little factoid I learned literally this week. We think energy is a big play for this region. Right now, energy is a bit of an Achilles heel for us. We're trying to turn that into a competitive advantage. Frankly, I think nuclear is a place you'll see us spend some time. I was told, and don't fact check me on this, but that over the years, you can imagine the nuclear work that happens for an aircraft carrier or a submarine, that Huntington Ingalls has trained over 10,000 people to be in that piece of their industry, right? So how about that? Talk about a step forward for us, or a competitive advantage for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's how you're going to grow. You're going to make new industries, is having that competitive advantage.
Right.
And as we're looking at nuclear energy, as we're looking at offshore wind coming this way, how do we have that competitive advantage? And yes, we're not going to implement a new system here in Hampton Roads or even in the state or the United States. But if we can take pilot projects and really start to develop these new models and show companies that, hey, they're really taking workforce and education serious. They're thinking of new ways of doing things. And so how do we move that forward? So a couple of other things. We did go to the business community. We saw how they were interacting. Yeah. Then we also went to the educational partners. Right. Tell me your thoughts on that educational system.
One of my takeaways, I went over there with, just like everybody, I'm sure, with conceptions or ideas of what I thought we were going to see, and I expected to see a very rigid system. You decide that you're going to be a pipe fitter or whatever that role is at 13, and that's the track you're on. And one of the things we learned is there's a lot more flexibility in that system than I realized. Another takeaway, and I think you all do this so well, connectivity between that at industry and the folks doing the training. And it goes back to I'm training you for a job that I have.
Yeah.
And and I think that's one of the things we need to do is push that down into the high school level. So I do believe there are still some programs that are just historic programs that are in those systems that are preparing people for jobs that don't really exist, or they're not many of those jobs anymore.
Yeah, exactly. They're not really keeping pace with what the industries are in need of, and that was something we noticed in Germany. Businesses are actually doing some of the training in the schools. There were some business leaders from those companies we visited that were actually embedded in the schools doing the training, which I found fascinating, and I love that. And I do know some of our community colleges are doing that too, but we do need to take it a little bit further down into.
Yeah, my takeaway was as a kid, you sort of start and you're in the classroom a lot early on, and in the company a little bit, and then as that thing moves, it just sort of shifts. As you get more seasoned, as you get a little bit older, you're in the company more and more. You're in the classroom less and less.
They're having the same issues as us in Germany. You know, the perception of skilled trades, the parents wanting them to go to four-year institutions. You know, I was kind of surprised about that. You hear the model's great and stuff, but they're up against the same things we are, changing that mindset of the skilled trades and different areas such as that. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's just as a parent of a senior in high school and senior in college, we all want our kids to have better than we had, right? I mean, everybody says it, and I think there is a real sense that for the last several decades that to do that means going to college. Yeah. And so, but I also think there's a reality that's set in on a lot of folks right now is that may be becoming cost prohibitive for a lot of people. And so the trade-off of that college education, and in many cases with that college debt, versus I'm going to get paid while I get trained, and I'm going to have a well-paying job when I get out. We've got to convince the parents of that as well.
Absolutely. I think that's going to be a big deal. So we had 22 people go with us on the trip, and we had a follow-up meeting where we talked about what we learned in there, and we had 21 of the 22 show up, which I was like, hey, that really has some buy-in and some commitment.
So, Sean, I think these presidents and mayors deserve a lot of credit. When we decided to do this trip, and I told them at the end of the trip, I didn't know if any of them would come. If they came, I wasn't 100% sure it was going to be time well spent. I didn't know if they were going to be prima donnas that we really had to cater to while we were over there, and would it just be a trip and we were done. And I got to tell you, they couldn't have been more willing to participate, more gracious when they were there. I mean, people think this stuff, hey, you're going to Germany, how lucky you. These trips are a grind. You are travel today is not pleasant. Once you get there, we were up early and we were out late, and so you're on the wrong time zone. About the time you get adjusted, it's time to come home. And so I believe that as much as we learned, that collaboration, that fellowship that got built among those folks, established among those folks, lays a little bit. And I got to tell you, they all get along well. I don't know that the presidents and the mayors have interacted like that as much, but that's that foundation of trust that we can use to develop the MOU, which I suspect you're going to talk about and move forward.
Absolutely. So we had a great trip. We learned a lot over there. It was a fast-paced trip. We understood about 80% of what they said.
But 10% ahead of me.
There you go. And we've come back, and some of the next steps are after that follow-up meeting is how do we go ahead and figure out what we can implement over here, or what are some pilot projects that we can implement. And one of the great things, and you came up with this idea, and brilliant, was to actually develop an MOU. Before we even left Germany, we had an MOU that we shared with the group to say, all right, we're going to commit to do some stuff as soon as we get back. And one of them is it identified what the mayors were going to do. It identified what the educational partners were going to do. It identified what you and I were going to do. And so the mayors are going to look at policy. The education providers are really going to take the what we learned and try to figure out how to develop it. And then you and I were going to play the part of how do we connect with the business community and things like that. So how do you think... How'd you come up with that idea? I mean, you're brilliant anyway.
I'm luckier than I am brilliant. I will tell you, this is fun, and this is our confession moment, right? That first draft of the MOU, we were on the bus coming back from one of the events. ChatGPT actually wrote that first draft, right? So it is, which is a kind of an incredible tool, but we knew what the elements were, but it allowed us to kind of walk out off the bus and virtually hand them a draft of what we were going going to look like. I think the beauty of it is and you've really become the author at this point. It has the ability to add people, so everybody can sort of come in. So we want to be as inclusive as we can be. I think it is broad enough to not, which it needs to be at this point in time. And then the next steps start to be. Oftentimes, we don't give ourselves credit for what we're already doing. Yeah. So I know your team is going to do an inventory of some of the programs that are already out there, because I think we're going to find there's more happening in this space certainly than I realized. Right. We've had a couple questions. Hey, where are you going back? Where are you going? Are you taking more people? One of the things we talked about was as good as Germany was, there's probably some good lessons here in the U.S. of communities. And the Atlanta division of the German Chamber of Commerce seems to be an organization that's doing some pretty interesting things. So I think we'll take a group down there. We learned on the trip that the NVRC, which is Northern Virginia's version of the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission, has been going to Stuttgart back and forth for over 20 years. Yeah. And they've got a lot of good work that we've done. And so we're all about stealing good ideas. So I think that sort of that inventory, a couple of trips domestically, spending a little bit of time in Northern Virginia will be the next immediate steps.
Yeah. And as we also learned, ChatGPT is the best thing you can have on your phone.
I got to tell you, the best thing I've seen, everybody's nervous about, is it going to take my job? And the best thing I've seen is AI is not going to take your job. Right. Somebody using AI is going to take your job.
Right, exactly. Exactly. No, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, this trip has, I think it's set the framework for how we can do these kind of things. And yes, I will say that this trip, and I've heard it from many people, everybody wants to be on the next trip, Doc. Everybody's like, how do I get involved in this next time? And we did identify some individuals that were missing from this trip. And it wasn't that we wanted to leave people out. It's just, trip is important. Once you get too big, you lose that camaraderie and that ability to really take bites out and not boil the ocean. But some of the individuals we identified for the next trip are like career and technical education, more business partners, more economic development. Anybody I'm missing? I can't remember.
I think the high schools, maybe whether that's superintendents or others to
exactly.
Come. Yeah.
So we want to make sure we got them on the next trip as well. And again, we've got some follow-up activities. So on the next podcast, when we get together, we'll just update everybody on where we are. But we're at the MOU stage now. We're starting to develop some pilots around what we learned over there. We've got a few trips that we're going to be taking to the embassy in Atlanta, or the Chamber of Commerce in Atlanta. How do we move this forward? Anything else on that trip that you found fascinating?
Nothing that I can talk about on the air. Yeah. But we're not starting from a blank canvas, right? You all have been doing some really good stuff. And what you and President Hemphill did, call it a year and a half ago, of pulling industry together, the healthcare and shipbuilding and ship repair and a host of others, and college presidents, and so literally you put them on either side of the table, and the industry, in short, said, you're giving us students that aren't employment ready, and here's what we need. Here's how and I think the presidents and the college representatives heard that, and so we're not. I give you all a ton of credit for starting this conversation a long time ago, and I think maybe that made the trip more productive.
Well, thanks, Doug. I think sometimes people need to look at what they're doing wrong, and face it that we got to change. And so we're doing that meeting again in a couple months. So you'll be on the group as well. So, well, Doug, thanks for joining me today.
Absolutely.
I think this has been a great conversation. And next month, we're going to have Stephanie Gorham here talking about Volunteer Hampton Roads. And again, my good friend Doug will be back at a future meeting. We may even start a new podcast called Shots with Sean. I think you said you'd be on the first one. But thanks for tuning in, and thanks for ThinkHire.